What's up guys? It's Tony from Streetball Strategies, where we use strategy to build your streetball legacy. Last week we were talking about how to play in extreme heat and what happens when a heat wave breaks. Usually it rains, and so this week we're talking about how to play in the rain. Now you may be saying to yourself, why would you ever play in the rain? If it rains, I'll just leave and come back later. Well, let me paint some scenarios for you. Let's say you're in the middle of a game and it starts raining. Let's say you are planning a day of ball with your friends, and for whatever reason it's hard to get all of you guys together. And so you finally organize a day where you're gonna all get together and play basketball. You get out here, you get a couple games in, and it starts raining. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna leave and call it a day? Let's say you're playing in a basketball tournament and it starts to rain, and their policy is as long as there's no lightning, we play rain or shine. Now you probably paid a lot of money to play in that tournament. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna walk away? My point is, sometimes playing in the rain is unavoidable, and as a streetball player, even if you live in a place where it rarely rains, you need to have the experience of playing in the rain under your belt. It's a tool in your toolbox that you should have as a streetball player. And the thing about rain is that it's an equalizer. It affects everyone in the same way, regardless if you're tall or short or you're fast or slow. Regardless, it affects everybody on the court the exact same way. And what happens is, because of that, rain requires you to plan ahead much more than you would under normal weather conditions, and the game becomes much more of a game of chess than the usual game that casual streetball players have of playing checkers out here. So let's break this down offensively and defensively. Honestly, when it comes to offense, you are going to be affected by the rain more than you will be defensively. So let's talk about footwork and movement to start with. When we're talking about rain, when we're talking about being wet, what happens with rain and wetness is that it takes away, it decreases surface tension. So it decreases surface tension in your hands, on the ball, on the court, on the rims, on the backboard. Surface tension is reduced noticeably when things get wet. What that means for you in terms of movement and footwork is that because of the reduction in surface tension, everything is going to be slippery. When everything is slippery, that means it may not affect your acceleration quite as much. There will be a noticeable compensation that you're gonna have to make when you accelerate in terms of movement, but when it's really going to come into effect is your ability to stop and your ability to turn while you're moving and running. Because you're not gonna be able to stop as quickly, because you're not gonna be able to stop as hard or turn as hard, that's going to naturally affect the way you accelerate, because you're not going to be able to accelerate as fast as you normally would, because you're not going to be able to stop as hard and quickly as you normally would. So if you can't stop, if you can't turn as hard and as quickly as you're used to, you're going to compensate for that naturally by just not accelerating as quickly. And that's going to put you at a disadvantage when it comes to the people that are defending you, because they know that you're not going to be moving as quickly as you normally would be. So because you can't move as quickly as you normally would be, when you do move, right, you now have to plan your movements more carefully. You're not able to move as quickly, as agilely as you normally would, and so the movements that you do make, you have to have more of a plan, more of a strategy, more of an intention when you do move. Because it's not as easy as it normally would be to shake off defenders because you're not as agile as you usually are. The same kind of thing for dribbling. So your hands are wet, the ball is wet, the ground is wet. You have that reduction in surface tension, making everything slippery, which means the ball is not going to bounce the way you're used to. It's going to be more slippery. It's going to feel like the ball is lost a little bit of air. It's gone a little bit flat, even though it really hasn't, because of that slipperiness and reduction in surface tension. And so with the ball being slippery and your hands being slippery and the court being slippery, the less dribbling you have to do, the better. Because you have less control than usual, the less control you have of dribbling the ball, the less dribbling you want to do, because you are putting yourself and the ball in danger of being stolen because you have less control. When it comes to passing, we have the same theme. Your hand is wet, the ball is wet, your teammates' hands are also wet. So in the same vein of movement and acceleration, passing the ball is not going to be nearly as affected as receiving the pass. And the harder the pass, the more velocity you have to put on the pass, the faster the pass is going to be, thus the harder it is going to be for your teammate to catch and receive the pass safely. And longer passes require more velocity on your pass, making it faster and harder for it to catch. And so you want to incorporate shorter passes when it comes to sharing the ball. When it comes to shooting, it's the same thing. Your hands are wet, the ball is wet, the ground is wet, the rim is wet, the backboard is wet. So not only is the ball slippery in your hands, but when it gets to the rim, if you hit the rim, if you hit the backboard, you don't have as much surface tension there, and thus the ball is not going to bounce off the backboard correctly if you're trying to bank it in. And if the ball hits the rim when you shoot, it is more likely that you're going to miss and the ball is going to kind of skid off the rim with that loss of surface tension, instead of maybe rebounding up in the air and then coming back down and going in. And because of the slipperiness, you have less control. And so with less control, you don't want to have to be putting more velocity and power behind your shots. You want less velocity, which requires less power, which when it gets to the basket is not going to get there as hard and as quickly. So you're not going to want to be taking long jump shots. You're going to want to get the ball as close to the basket as possible when you shoot. It's easier said than done, but you're going to find that's the best strategy to go with when you're playing with a wet ball on a wet court. So to recap, for offense, you have slower footwork, slower movement around the court. You have less dribbling because you have less control of the basketball. You have less passing and shorter passing when you're sharing the ball, and you have closer shots at the basket because they require less control and less velocity. When it comes to defense, the thing about rain and the court being wet is defensively it kind of gives you an advantage, because now the offense cannot be as tricky. They can't be as distracting. They can't use as many fakes to try to draw you in defensively because they have less control of the basketball. And so they can't draw you in with fakes nearly as much when they have the ball. So you don't have to worry about that as much when you're defending them. And so now you have a choice to make, because you don't have to worry about those fakes. Now all you have to worry about is playing solid defense. And when it comes to that, you have two choices. One is you can play up on the ball handler and try to pressure the ball, knowing that because the ball is wet, they have less control, and thus you can try to force a turnover by playing up on them. Or you play off of them and try to disrupt passing lanes, because the passing is going to be more difficult as well because they have less control over passing and receiving. And that's going to be up to your discretion as to who you're playing against. Are you playing against someone who the strategy would be better and more effective to play up on them and pressure the ball, or would it be better to play off of them and pressure their passing lanes? One small disadvantage you could have as a defender on a wet court is if you're running into screens and picks. So if you're defending the ball and you come into a screen and you try to fight through or over that screen, because the court is wet, you could find yourself trailing behind the play more than usual just because of the slipperiness of the court. And so when it comes to being screened on defense, what you should probably do is maybe you switch if you and your team feel comfortable doing that. But my suggestion would be just go ahead and go under the screen. Just go under. It's not a problem in these kind of weather conditions to give your man that space where he may, under normal weather conditions, pull up for the jumper, because when it's wet, it's less likely that that player is going to pull up for that jumper with that little space that you're giving him by going under the pick because it's wet. I mean, especially around the three-point line, if you go under screens on the three-point line, it's likely that they're not going to pull up for that three when conditions are wet and slippery. So when we're talking about defending in the rain, we're talking about playing a good, solid, textbook defense, and then deciding whether or not you're going to pressure the ball or if you're going to pressure the passing lane. In terms of rebounds or loose balls, because they're so quick reactionary plays, your natural reaction is as soon as you see a rebound or as soon as a ball gets tipped towards out of bounds, it's your natural reaction to put all of your effort and energy into exploding after that rebound or that loose ball. But you have to keep in mind that in court conditions like this, when there's puddles and the court is wet, it's more slippery. And so if you go from being pretty stationary to immediately trying to sprint as hard as you can, the possibility of you slipping and going down immediately to the ground and hurting yourself is much higher than usual. And so in court conditions like this, you're going to find that you, as well as everyone else, becomes less likely to chase down unnecessary loose balls or unnecessary rebounds and just sort of let them go out of bounds instead of trying to be stationary and then explode and then maybe hurting yourself in the process. You're really going to have to be discretionary and smart about how and when to do those things, because if you can do them safely and gain possession of the ball, that's great. But if you try to go after a ball when it's unnecessary and you end up hurting yourself, then that was obviously the wrong call. So as you see, playing in the rain comes down to planning ahead, having an intention, having a strategy, and then when it comes time to use that plan and that strategy, deciding whether or not it is smart and safe to do so. I hope you guys found this video informative. Like I said, playing in the rain, playing when it's wet is an experience you should have as a street ball player. You want to have it on multiple occasions under different conditions, because it will just make you a more well-rounded basketball player. The more different experiences you have out here, the more different conditions that you have experienced playing in, the more you can draw from that in normal conditions and use that experience to your advantage. If you guys did find this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you're notified of all my future videos. And I will see you guys next week.
You know the name, Shaq aim to maintain money on the brain, can't stop the rain.